Welcome back to my channel. This is the final video of my Stranger Things project, so we are finishing up everything. This is what the basement currently looks like, and I still have a few things to make, and I need to get the rest of the items in here and glued down permanently. So let's get started. The first thing I want to make is Joyce's phone. In season 1, she keeps getting all of these weird staticky phone calls from the upside down, and her phone ends up getting fried. So I thought it would be something cute to include in the project, and I'm going to try to make it out of polymer clay because I couldn't really find a phone that looked similar to what I wanted. I've never made a phone before, so bear with me. I'm starting by just making a rectangular shape and basically going for a retro style rotary phone that is going to hang on the wall. So I'm just rounding the rectangular part to create the base of the phone, and I'm poking a hole in the bottom of it for the telephone cord. To create the actual phone, I'm making a smaller rectangle and again, just rounding the corners, and then I'm going to cut off some of the excess clay to make it look like an actual phone. And I'm just kind of constantly placing it on top just to make sure it's good size-wise. I want the phone to maintain that curve, so I'm going to bake it over this little foil log to maintain the shape. And this is what they look like once they've been baked. Not amazing, but it'll do. To make the little rotary part, I just cut a small circle out of mat board and I'm just going to glue that on. I cut 3 small pieces off of a coffee stirrer, and this is going to be for the hook. Now, the phone is actually going to be hanging off the hook, so it doesn't really need to hang on this. This is just going to be for looks. Now that everything is dry, I can start painting, and I mixed together this retro mustardy yellow to try to match the color of Joyce's foam. And I'm also going to be painting a piece of wire at the same time. That is going to be the phone cord. I'm painting the hook part silver, and I'm going to paint the rotary part white in the center, and then I'm going to add some tiny black dots around it just using a toothpick. To make the telephone cord, I'm taking the wire and I'm going to wrap it around a skewer, and I'm going to make sure to wrap it pretty tightly so I get a good coil. I'm adding a little bit of glue to the hole on the base part of the phone, and I'm going to stick one end of the wire in, and I'm going to let it dry before I add the other end of the wire to the telephone. And that's what it looks like so far. I think it looks pretty cute. I really love the phone cord. I don't know why, I'm just kind of obsessed with it. Now I want to make the phone look like it's been burnt. So I started off by using some black chalk pastels, and that wasn't really working how I wanted it to. So I went in with some black paint, which immediately was a bad idea. Yeah, I couldn't really blend it out as much as I wanted to, and I did the best I could. That is the end result, and all in all, I do think it turned out pretty cute, and I can't wait to add it to the project. The next thing I'm going to add are some roller skates. I purchased these 3D printed ones on Etsy, so all I have to do is paint them. I thought it would be fun to include these in the project to pay homage to season 4 when Eleven hits Angela with one of the roller skates at the roller rink. So I'm painting them white first, just like as a primer, and then I'll go ahead and start on the wheels and the bottoms, which are going to be a neon orange. Moving on to the rest of the roller skate, based on the reference photos, they're kind of like an ugly beige color, so that's what we're doing. Once everything dried, I can now cut off the bottom pieces using my flush cutters, and I always want to say flesh cutters, even though I know it's flush. And then I just filed down any little remaining bits on the bottom of the wheels using my little file. And now I'm just adding some black to the bottom, and I also painted the laces and other details as well. And I added a bit of silver on the bottom to make them look a bit more realistic. Now for the fun part, I can add some blood to one of the wheels, which unfortunately was off camera. Sorry about that. And that's what it looks like when it's done. I think they turned out really cute. I cover them in Mod Podge, obviously just to seal everything in. And yeah, I like that there's like a tiny, tiny bit of gore that we can add to the basement. But yeah, they're pretty cute. The next thing I want to make are these little D&D binders that I saw in the series finale. They're playing D&D in like one of the final scenes, and each one of them has like their own binder with their name on it, and obviously I had to include them. So I'm just cutting a thin piece of cardboard into strips, and then I'm going to cut each strip into smaller pieces to make the actual binders. Once I get them all cut out, I'm using my ruler to bend the center of each piece to make it look like the spine of a binder. I'm just cutting some strips out of white paper and some colored cardstock because these binders can't be empty. So I just cut out a ton of paper, and I marked outlines on each strip because that's where I'm going to fold them. And I'm just going to fold them like accordion style, as you can see. And once I'm done with all of them, they're going to be glued inside. I'm going to start painting the binders, and for the binder spine, I'm gluing on a little piece of masking tape because I want that section to be a different texture and sort of raised to make it look a little more realistic. And once that dried, I went ahead and painted it. Once everything dried, I started adding the names using a paint pen. In the show, it looks like they use those little letter stickers to spell out their names, which would have been amazing if I could have found tiny little stickers to do the same, but I couldn't, so this is what we're doing. Honestly, not totally happy with how the names look, but it is what it is. Now I can start adding the paper inside all the binders. So starting by adding some tacky glue and just gluing each end of the little paper accordion into the front and the back binder covers. And then I'm just going to add in some of the other colored paper just randomly because I don't want this to look too uniform. I want it to look a little bit messy and I want each one to look a little bit different. I don't think that everything in the binder would be white, so that's why I cut out some random colors just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. And I'm just going to repeat this process with all of the binders. And this is what they look like when they're done. I did coat them with some Mod Podge, and I think they turned out pretty cute, and they're going to make a really great addition to the D&D table. The next thing I'm going to make is a little random, but I feel like every basement needs a cardboard box just full of random junk. So I drew this little template on some cardstock, and I'm just using my ruler to draw the lines where I'm going to be folding the flaps of the box. And then again, I'm just going to use my ruler to bend each one. I made this little tab on one edge so that I can easily glue the side of the box together. And then once that dried, I literally just put it together like you would put together an actual cardboard box. But I did leave the top open because I'm going to be filling it with stuff. And I also added some tiny pieces of packing tape just to make it look a little bit more realistic. To bulk up the inside of the box, I put in these packing peanuts because I want the items that I'm putting into the box to be visible. So I just grabbed some random things like this green fabric, which I just kind of folded together. And then I made this little pep rally sign, and I added a light bright box, and then of course Joyce's Christmas lights. And I also made this little JCPenney shopping bag, which I did end up taking out because it looked really, really bad. Honestly, I don't even know what I was thinking, including it in the first place. That's what it looks like once I finished, but I do end up changing this later. Moving on to the D&D table, I've sort of been putting this off because I've never played D&D before, and I don't know how things should be set up or really what any of this stuff even is, but printed all of this out and just arranged it based on what I thought it should look like. But I would say this is a focal point of the basement because obviously this game is such a big part of the show, and I just wanted it to look a little bit messy and like they were in the middle of a game. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I do add a few more things later once I get it into the project. Next, I'm going to finally fill up this little bookcase that we made months and months ago. This goes on the right side of the couch, and I'm really just filling it with random stuff because I wanted it to look kind of messy because, again, it's in a basement. Now I can go ahead and add these items into the project and I can start to glue things down. I printed off the thing poster and the tiger poster and glued those in, which made an immediate difference to the room. Like once I got those in, it really started to feel like Mike's basement. I also printed off some little drawings that I'm going to glue behind the couch because they always seem to have like drawings and paintings back there. I also included some other little Easter eggs from the series. And at this point, I'm also going to glue in some other items and also just kind of moving things around and trying to figure out where I want things to live. This is what the room looks like so far. We are close to being done, but I do have a few more things I need to tackle before the room is considered completely finished, starting with lighting, which is stressing me out a little bit. I want to make this lamp next to the couch, as you can see in the reference photo. And I've never made a lamp before, but we're going to give it a shot. This lamp is a very unique shape, so I found these wooden beads at Michael's and I cut off a piece of a straw and I'm going to use that to create the shape. I want this to actually be a working lamp, so it's very important that it's hollow in the middle. So I'm just going to start off by gluing the straw into the bead and I'm just using some hot glue. Because the straw is a bit more narrow than this hole, I need the glue to kind of fill that space and I also want it to dry instantly. Now I'm going to cover everything with some tacky glue and some air dried clay. And the lamp appears to be textured, so I'm going to use a little piece of foil to texturize it and make it look kind of bumpy. I let this dry overnight and now I can paint it. I'm going to start with the base coat of black because based on the reference photo, it looks like it's kind of a dark green and black. And then once the black dries, I'm going to sponge on a dark green. So you'll still be able to see some of the black underneath. To make the lampshade, I just cut a rectangle out of a piece of cardstock and I'm just going to glue the edges together. The lampshade needs to sit on top of the base, so I'm just using some wire that I'm going to cut to size and glue inside of the lampshade. It was kind of hard to tell what color the lampshade was, but I opted for this kind of like light mustard color. And then I'm just going to use some black string to create like a little top and bottom border just to make it look a little bit more finished. I drill a small hole in the bottom of the back wall because my lights need to come through there. The battery pack is going to be on the other side, so I'll be able to turn this lamp on and off. And then the idea is to basically thread the lights through the lamp like so. This is probably not the most efficient way to do this, but that's what I'm doing. As you can see, I just threading all the twinkle lights in, and then I'm going to ball them up and I'm just going to glue it in place. I put him in the spot where he's gonna live and turned it on, and it works, and it looks like a lamp, so I'm pretty happy. Moving on, I wanted to create something to go in the right-hand corner of the room because it was looking a little bare and I didn't really have any other posters or anything to put there. And I also didn't want anything that was going to make the space look too busy. So I decided to make the corroded coffin banner that we see in Eddie's room in his trailer. And this was super easy. I just cut out a piece of off-white fabric and used some Sharpies, and I just did my best to copy the reference photo, and I think it turned out okay. I glued it into the corner of the room, and I used some tiny beads to look like it was tacked onto the wall. And I think it looks pretty good. Now I want to make some snacks. There's always a ton of snacks in the basement, so I'm starting off by making some chips. I found pictures of 80s Lay's and Doritos bags and made little templates on Canva. I printed them out and covered them with some packing tape so it gives that shiny chip bag look. And once I cut them out, I'm just going to fold them like so. Basically, there's 2 back flaps and then 2 tabs, and we're going to glue the tabs together to give us the bag shape. I let that dry, and then I can go ahead and glue together the bottoms of the bags, and I'm just stuffing them with a little piece of paper just to make sure that it doesn't dry completely flat. I want it to look like a full bag of chips. So I'm just using a bit of tacky glue, and then I'm going to clamp it together and let it dry completely. Now we can't have chip bags without chips, so to make those, I'm going to use some polymer clay. Starting with the Lay's, I'm just going to mix together some yellow and some white to sort of make like a pale yellow potato chip color. And I'm going to roll it out pretty thin, and using a straw, I'm just cutting out some tiny circles. And then I'm just taking each one and kind of bending them slightly because, as we know, not all potato chips are perfectly round. They're like folded and all kinds of things. So I'm just trying to make them all look a little bit different. Once I finish with the potato chips, I can go ahead and make the Doritos. So I rolled out a piece of yellow clay, and I'm just cutting it into narrow strips, and then I'm just going to take each strip and cut it into really small triangles. And I'm doing this all on my mat that I use to bake these on. It just makes it so much easier when I go to bake everything because I don't have to move the mat onto the pan. It's already ready to go to be baked. And I'm kind of doing the same thing I did with the potato chips. I'm kind of bending each one just a little bit because, again, Doritos are not perfectly flat. So I'm just repeating the process with all of the clay. Once they're baked, this is what they look like. These are the potato chips, and they are done. I don't need to do anything else to them. And these are the little Doritos, which do need to be painted. And you might be thinking, why didn't you just use orange clay? Yes, that would have been much easier, but I didn't have any orange. And instead of just going to get some, I was impatient and just used yellow. And now I have to paint them. So I'm sticking them all to some painter's tape. That makes it much easier to paint because they can't go anywhere. While the paint is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle some orange craft sand on top of them to make it look like the Dorito dust. And I could not wait to do this part. I was so excited. I don't know why. I had a feeling these Doritos were going to turn out so freaking cute. And I was right. This is what they look like when they're done. And I'm obsessed with these. Like, they're so adorable. Um, I'm just so happy with how they turned out. I put them in their bag and oh my gosh, they look so adorable. And I also stuck the Lays in their bag. Those look really cute too. Don't get me wrong, but those Doritos, I don't know, they're just so cute. Moving on, I want to make some cheese balls. So I've seen these in a few scenes in Mike's basement, so I definitely wanted to include them. They come in like a Pringles-like container. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a cylinder, and I'm just using some cardstock. And I cut out a triangle, and I'm just rolling around a pencil just to give it some curve. This will make it much easier to glue together. I also cut out a small square, and I'm tracing around the cylinder to make the bottom of the container. I'm not going to be making a top because the container is going to be open. Just like with the chip bags, I found a picture of the 80s style cheese ball logo, and I'm just going to glue that to the cylinder. And I painted the edges blue to match and coated everything with Mod Podge. To make the actual cheese balls, I'm using these tiny orange beads. I just found those at Michael's. I'm adding some glue to the container and filling it up with the beads, and that's what it looks like so far. And just like with the Doritos, I want to add the cheese dust, so I'm going to add some glue on top and sprinkle on some of the orange craft sand, and it looks super cute. I also made a peanut butter boppers box. This is something that Steve mentions in the final season, so that is our final snack. And now I can add everything into the project and finally finish up the basement. I forgot to talk about this quilt earlier. A very kind woman on Etsy made this for me, and it's absolutely perfect. She got it done so quickly. I sent her the reference photos, and it was like I had it in like a few days. It's amazing. I'm obsessed. I will link her shop below. Now I'm just going to add all of the final elements into the basement, and I know I said this already, but I'm actually going to do it now and kind of glue everything, or at least put everything in place. And this is the finished basement. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I love all of the little Easter eggs from the series, and I'm also really happy I chose not to add a ceiling because it would have made it really hard to see all of these little details. The last thing I needed to do was cover up all the areas that were exposed so that all you can see are the actual scenes. So I just used some black mat board to do this, and it was looking a bit plain, so I decided to make some vines. I painted some twine black and red, and I'm just gluing them to the mat board. I just wanted it to look a little bit more interesting, but I didn't want anything that would actually distract from the main parts of the project. And when I was done, I covered everything in Mod Podge, and I'm actually really stoked with how it turned out. I also added a bottom border just to make everything look really cohesive. And I added these little magnetic doors to hide the battery packs for my lighting. I'd like to make them look better eventually, but for now, this will do. And this is a list of objects that are in Mike's basement. So ideally this would be displayed with the project so people can find these in the scene. And here is the finished project.